In the heart of London, where history and modernity intertwined seamlessly, there was a square that seemed to breathe life into every visitor who stepped foot in it. The air carried whispers of centuries-old tales, mingling with the chatter of tourists eager to capture memories on their cameras. On one side stood Buckingham Palace, its grandeur commanding attention, while on the other, rows of quaint shops added charm to the bustling scene. It was here, amidst this picturesque setting, that an ordinary day would soon spiral into something extraordinary. Private Thomas Whitaker stood tall near the palace gates, his presence as imposing as the structure behind him. Dressed in the iconic crimson tunic and towering bearskin hat, he was a living symbol of tradition and discipline. At just 24 years old, Whitaker had already earned a reputation within the Queen's Guard for his unwavering focus and quiet strength. His posture was perfect, back straight, shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, and his gaze remained fixed ahead, unyielding despite the distractions around him. To most people passing by, he might have appeared statuesque, almost robotic, but those who knew him understood the depth of his character. Beneath the uniform lay a man driven by a deep sense of duty, humility, and respect for the role he played in safeguarding not only the monarchy, but also the values it represented. The morning sunlight filtered through the trees, casting playful shadows on the cobblestone pavement. Tourists snapped photos, some posing beside the guards, others marveling at their stoic demeanor. Children giggled as they mimicked the guards' rigid stance, much to the amusement of their parents. Among the throng of visitors was Victor Langley, a man whose polished appearance belied the ugliness simmering beneath the surface. Clad in an expensive suit and leather shoes that clicked against the stones, Victor exuded confidence. But it was a confidence rooted in arrogance rather than genuine self-assurance. He walked briskly, his German shepherd Max trotting obediently beside him. Victor wasn't new to making scenes. In fact, he thrived on them. Whether it was berating waitstaff, at fancy restaurants, or arguing loudly over trivial matters, he found pleasure in asserting dominance wherever he went. Today, however, he seemed particularly agitated. As he approached the guard post, his lips curled into a sneer. "Still wearing those ridiculous costumes, are we?" he muttered under his breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear, but not quite loud enough to draw immediate attention. His tone dripped with disdain, and his eyes narrowed as they landed on Private Whitaker. Max, sensing his master's tension, let out a low growl. The dog was no stranger to Victor's volatile nature. He'd been trained to react to even the slightest command. But today, something felt different. There was an edge to Victor's voice, a sharpness that hinted at trouble brewing. Whitaker, though seemingly oblivious to Victor's muttered insult, remained alert. Years of training had taught him to read subtle cues. The shift in someone's stance, the flicker of emotion in their eyes, the faintest change in breathing patterns. He noticed Victor's clenched fists, the way his jaw tightened, and the restless energy radiating from him. Still, Whitaker didn't move. His training dictated patience, restraint, and above all, composure. As Victor drew closer, his irritation grew. Perhaps it was the sight of the guard standing so still, so dignified, that fueled his anger. Or maybe it was the knowledge that his own wealth and status meant nothing in the face of such steadfast dedication to duty. Whatever the reason, Victor decided to act on his impulses. With a swift motion, he unclipped Max's leash and gave the dog a sharp command. "Go," he barked, pointing directly at Whitaker. The crowd gasped collectively as Max lunged forward, his powerful frame moving with alarming speed. Bystanders scrambled out of the way, some shouting warnings, others frozen in shock. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. Yet through it all, Whitaker remained unmoved. His gloved hands gripped the rifle resting against his shoulder, his feet planted firmly on the ground. His expression betrayed no hint of fear or panic. Instead, there was a calm determination etched onto his face, a quiet resolve that spoke volumes about the man beneath the uniform. For Whitaker, this wasn't just about following orders or maintaining protocol. It was about embodying the principles he believed in: honor, courage, and resilience. And as Max closed the distance between them, snarling and snapping, Whitaker prepared himself, not for retaliation, but for what came next. The square buzzed with anticipation. Some onlookers held their breath, fearing the worst. Others whispered prayers, hoping for a peaceful resolution. No one could have predicted what happened next, or how Whitaker's response would leave an indelible mark on everyone present. What began as a tense standoff was about to transform into a moment of profound humanity, proving once again that true strength lies not in aggression, but in grace. As Max surged forward, his powerful legs propelling him with frightening speed, the atmosphere in the square shifted dramatically. What had been a lively, cheerful scene just moments ago now felt heavy with tension. The German shepherd's deep growls echoed through the open space, sending shivers down the spines of those who watched. His teeth were bared, his muscles coiled like springs, and his eyes locked onto Private Thomas Whitaker with predatory intensity. To anyone else, this would have been a moment of sheer panic, a primal instinct to flee or fight kicking in, but not for Whitaker. He remained as still as a marble statue, his presence unshaken despite the chaos erupting around him. Victor Langley stood a few feet away, his arms crossed smugly over his chest. A cruel smirk played on his lips as he watched the unfolding spectacle. "Let's see how tough you really are," he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. His words weren't directed at Max, they were aimed squarely at Whitaker. For Victor, this wasn't just about setting his dog loose. It was an act of deliberate provocation, a twisted test designed to expose weakness. He wanted to see if the guard's famed discipline would crumble under pressure, if the man beneath the uniform could be broken. But what Victor didn't realize was that he was dealing with someone far more composed and far more capable than he could have imagined. The crowd reacted with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Some tourists screamed, clutching their children close to shield them from the danger. Others stepped back instinctively, creating a wide circle around Whitaker and the charging dog. Phones were raised high, capturing every second of the confrontation, while murmurs rippled through the gathering. "Is he going to do something?" one woman whispered anxiously to her companion. "He can't just stand there," another exclaimed, his voice tinged with frustration. Yet amidst the growing anxiety there was also a strange sense of awe. Whitaker's refusal to flinch, even in the face of such a direct threat, was mesmerizing. It was as though time itself slowed down, leaving everyone holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Max closed the distance between himself and Whitaker in seconds. The dog's growls grew louder, more menacing as he circled the guard, his hackles raised. Spit flew from his jaws as he snapped at the air, testing the boundaries of this unfamiliar opponent. Most people would have recoiled in fear, or worse, lashed out in defense, but Whitaker did neither. Instead, he maintained his rigid stance, his gaze fixed straight ahead, betraying no hint of emotion. Inside, however, his mind raced. Decades of training kicked in, guiding him through the situation with precision and clarity. He knew better than to make any sudden movements that might escalate the dog's aggression. Every fiber of his being was focused on de-escalation, on finding a way to neutralize the threat without resorting to violence. Victor, meanwhile, seemed emboldened by the reaction his actions had sparked. He strutted closer, his polished shoes clicking against the cobblestones, clearly reveling in the chaos he had created. "Not so brave now, are you?" he taunted, his voice loud enough to carry across the square. His words carried a venomous undertone, laced with racial slurs meant to cut deeper than any physical attack. To Victor, this wasn't merely about humiliating a single guard. It was about asserting dominance, about proving his superiority over someone he viewed as inferior. But even as he hurled insults, it became increasingly clear that Whitaker wasn't playing into his game. The guard's silence was deafening, a stark contrast to Victor's theatrics. It was as if Whitaker's calm demeanor was a mirror reflecting Victor's own insecurities, exposing the fragility behind his bravado. For Whitaker, the challenge wasn't just physical, it was mental. Standing motionless required immense control, especially when faced with a snarling animal mere inches away. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins, but he forced himself to remain steady. Years of military drills had taught him the importance of maintaining composure under pressure, and today was no exception. He reminded himself why he wore the uniform, not for personal glory, but to serve as a symbol of stability and strength. In that moment, he represented not only himself but the institution he belonged to, and he refused to let it, or himself, be diminished by hatred or cruelty. The tension reached its peak when Max lunged again, this time snapping dangerously, close to Whitaker's leg. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by cries of alarm. Several people shouted for help, urging the guard to defend himself. One elderly man yelled, "Do something! You're armed!" referring to the ceremonial rifle resting against Whitaker's shoulder. But Whitaker knew better than to reach for the weapon. Drawing it, even defensively, could escalate the situation further, potentially putting innocent bystanders at risk. Besides, using force against an animal wasn't part of his training or his moral code. Instead, he relied on something far more powerful: patience and understanding. As the seconds ticked by, Whitaker began to notice subtle changes in Max's behavior. Despite the dog's fierce exterior, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Max continued to growl and bark, circling Whitaker warily, but his movements lacked the same ferocity as before. Whitaker recognized this as a sign, an opportunity to connect with the animal on a deeper level. Slowly, deliberately, he adjusted his grip on the rifle, lowering it slightly to rest across his lap. Then, with painstaking care, he extended one gloved hand toward Max, palm open and facing upward. His voice, when he finally spoke, was soft yet firm, cutting through the noise like a gentle breeze. "Easy now, boy," he said, his tone reassuring. "It's okay." The effect was immediate. Max froze mid-growl, his ears perking up at the sound of Whitaker's voice. For a brief moment, the dog hesitated, torn between his master's commands and the unexpected kindness emanating from the guard. Then, cautiously, he took a step forward, sniffing Whitaker's outstretched hand. The crowd held its breath, unsure of what would happen next. Would Max bite? Would Whitaker finally react? But instead of aggression, something remarkable occurred. Max sat down obediently at Whitaker's side, his tail thumping lightly against the ground. It was as if the dog had found solace in the guard's calm presence, choosing to trust him over the hostility displayed by Victor. Victor's expression darkened instantly. Gone was the smug confidence. In its place was pure rage. "Max, get back here," he bellowed, his voice cracking with frustration. He yanked on the leash he still held, trying to regain control, but Max ignored him completely. The dog remained seated beside Whitaker, his body relaxed, his posture signaling loyalty to this newfound ally. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. The very creature Victor had unleashed as a weapon had turned against him, choosing compassion over cruelty. The crowd erupted into cheers, applause breaking out as people expressed their relief and admiration. Strangers patted Whitaker on the back, offering words of gratitude and praise. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the yaw, triumphant moment for posterity. Meanwhile, Victor stood fuming, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. He muttered curses under his breath, glaring daggers at both Whitaker and Max, but it was too late. The damage had been done, not just to his ego, but to his reputation as well. Little did he know the repercussions of his actions were only beginning to unfold. What started as a calculated attempt to humiliate a guard had transformed into a powerful demonstration of grace under fire. Whitaker's response hadn't just diffused a dangerous situation, it had inspired those who witnessed it, reminding them of the enduring power of dignity and restraint. And as the dust settled, one thing was abundantly clear. Private Thomas, Whitaker wasn't just a soldier. He was a leader, a protector, and above all, a man of unparalleled character. As the crowd erupted into cheers, their applause echoing through the square like rolling thunder, Private Thomas Whitaker remained as composed as ever. His gloved hand rested gently on Max's head, offering a reassuring pat that seemed to calm the dog even further. The German shepherd leaned slightly into the touch, his tail wagging softly, a stark contrast to the ferocity he had displayed just moments earlier. It was an extraordinary sight, a towering guard in ceremonial uniform forming an unexpected bond with a once aggressive animal. For many in the crowd, it felt surreal, almost cinematic, as if they were witnessing something far greater than a mere act of de-escalation. Victor Langley, however, was anything but pleased. Standing a few feet away, his face flushed with humiliation, he clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The smirk that had adorned his lips earlier had vanished, replaced by a scowl that twisted his features into something ugly and bitter. He tugged forcefully on the leash still clutched in his hand, barking commands at Max in a desperate attempt to reclaim control. "Come here, you useless mutt," he shouted, his voice rising above the din of the cheering crowd. But Max didn't budge. Instead, the dog glanced back at Victor briefly before returning his attention to Whitaker, his body language making it clear where his loyalty now lay. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. Victor, who had sought to assert dominance through cruelty and intimidation, found himself utterly powerless. His own weapon, the dog he had unleashed with such malice, had turned against him, choosing instead to side with the very person he had intended to humiliate. Some members of the crowd couldn't help but chuckle nervously at the absurdity of it all, while others exchanged knowing looks, silently marveling at how quickly the tables had turned. A woman standing nearby muttered under her breath, "Karma really does work fast." Whitaker, meanwhile, continued to focus on Max, ignoring Victor's increasingly frantic attempts to regain authority. With slow, deliberate movements, he adjusted, his grip on the rifle resting across his lap, ensuring it remained secure while maintaining his connection with the dog. Though his outward demeanor remained stoic, there was a flicker of triumph in his eyes. Not the arrogant kind that comes from besting an opponent, but the quiet satisfaction of having diffused a volatile situation without resorting to anger or retaliation. In that moment, Whitaker embodied everything his uniform represented: strength tempered by compassion, discipline paired with empathy, but the story was far from over. As Victor realized that neither Max nor the crowd was on his side, his frustration boiled over into outright rage. "This isn't over," he snarled, pointing a finger accusingly at Whitaker. "You think this little stunt makes you some kind of hero? You're nothing but a glorified statue." His words were sharp, designed to cut deep, but they fell flat. No one in the square paid him any mind. Most people were too busy congratulating Whitaker or marveling at Max's transformation. Even the children who had been frightened earlier now giggled as they watched the dog nuzzle affectionately against the guard's leg. What Victor failed to understand was that his actions had already spoken louder than any insult he could hurl. By setting his dog on a member of the Queen's Guard, a symbol of tradition, honor, and service, he had crossed a line that resonated deeply with those around him. To attack a guard wasn't just an assault on an individual. It was an affront to the values they stood for. And when bystanders began pulling out their phones to record the incident, capturing every word and gesture, Victor unwittingly sealed his fate. Within minutes, footage of the confrontation began circulating online, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. Hashtags like "Respect Our Heroes" and "Grace Under Pressure" trended rapidly, accompanied by glowing praise for Whitaker's composure and bravery. Amidst the chaos, law enforcement officials finally arrived on the scene. 2 police officers pushed their way through the throng of onlookers, their expressions stern as they assessed the situation. One approached Whitaker, speaking respectfully, as he asked for details about what had transpired. Whitaker responded, calmly, recounting the events without embellishment or emotion. He avoided casting blame or expressing anger, focusing solely on the facts. When asked about Max's behavior, he simply stated, "Animals respond to energy. If you approach them with kindness, they'll usually reciprocate." The second officer turned his attention to Victor, who immediately launched into a tirade insisting that he had done nothing wrong. "He provoked my dog," Victor exclaimed, jabbing a finger in Whitaker's direction. That thing should never have been allowed near us." His accusations drew skeptical looks from both officers and several members of the crowd. One tourist, unable to contain herself, called out, "We all saw what happened. You're the one who let your dog loose." Her words elicited murmurs of agreement from others, reinforcing the overwhelming consensus that Victor was in the wrong. By the time the officers reviewed the videos captured by witnesses, there was no denying the truth. Victor's actions, and his racially charged slurs, were undeniable evidence of misconduct. They informed him that he would need to accompany them to the station for further questioning, citing charges of inciting violence and endangering public safety. At first, Victor protested vehemently, shouting about his rights and threatening legal action. But as the reality of his predicament sank in, his protests grew quieter, until he was left sputtering incoherently. Reluctantly, he allowed the officers to lead him away, casting one last venomous glare at Whitaker as he departed. With Victor gone, the atmosphere in the square shifted once again. The tension dissipated, replaced by a sense of relief and admiration. Strangers approached Whitaker, shaking his hand and thanking him for handling the situation with such grace. Some shared stories of their own encounters with racism or prejudice, expressing gratitude for seeing someone stand firm against hatred. Others simply wanted to shake his hand or snap a selfie with him, eager to preserve a memory of the day they witnessed true courage in action. Despite the attention, Whitaker remained humble, deflecting praise and redirecting focus to the importance of unity and respect. One particularly touching moment came when a young boy, no older than 7, stepped forward timidly. Clutching a small British flag in one hand, he looked up at Whitaker with wide, admiring eyes. "Are you a superhero?" he asked earnestly. Whitaker knelt down to meet the child's gaze, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "No," he replied gently. "I'm just a man doing my job, but I promise you this: kindness is always stronger than hate." The boy beamed, clutching the flag tighter as though holding on to the lesson Whitaker had imparted. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light over the square, life slowly returned to normal. Tourists resumed taking photos. Vendors reopened their stalls and the hum of conversation filled the air once more. Yet the impact of what had transpired lingered long after the initial excitement faded. For those who had witnessed it, the encounter between Whitaker and Victor served as a powerful reminder of the choices we make in moments of conflict. Would we react with anger and aggression, perpetuating cycles of hostility? Or would we choose compassion and understanding, breaking those cycles and inspiring others to do the same? Private Thomas Whitaker's decision to remain calm and extend kindness, even to a dog trained to attack, spoke volumes about the kind of person he was. It wasn't just about following protocol or upholding tradition. It was about embodying the principles he believed in, showing the world that true strength lies not in domination but in dignity. And as the day drew to a close, leaving behind only memories and lessons learned, one thing was certain: Whitaker had proven himself to be far more than a soldier in a red tunic and bearskin hat. He was a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring power of humanity, and a living example of what it means to rise above adversity with grace and courage. The aftermath of the incident rippled far beyond the confines of the London square where it had unfolded. As news of Victor Langley's reckless actions and Private Thomas Whitaker's remarkable response spread, the story quickly captured national attention. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions and traditional news outlets scrambled to cover every detail. Headlines like "Guards Grace Under Fire Inspires Millions" and "Man's Racist Outburst Backfires Spectacularly" dominated newspapers, websites, and television broadcasts. People from all walks of life weighed in, sharing their thoughts, admiration, and outrage over what had transpired. Victor, meanwhile, found himself at the center of a media storm, but not in the way he might have once imagined. Once a man accustomed to commanding respect through wealth and influence, he now faced widespread condemnation. Footage of his behavior during the confrontation circulated endlessly online, with commentators dissecting his every word and action. His racially charged slurs were particularly scrutinized, sparking conversations about prejudice, privilege, and accountability. Many viewers expressed disgust at his attempt to use his dog as a weapon, while others pointed out how his arrogance had ultimately led to his downfall. At the police station, Victor was formally charged with multiple offenses including inciting violence, public disturbance, and animal endangerment. During questioning, he continued to defend himself, insisting that he had been provoked by Whitaker's mere presence. "I didn't do anything wrong," he snapped at the officers, his tone laced with indignation. "That guard should have moved or done something when my dog approached him." But his arguments fell on deaf ears. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Video footage, witness testimonies, and even Max's refusal to obey his commands painted a damning picture of a man who had acted recklessly and maliciously. By the time Victor was released on bail, pending further investigation, his reputation was in tatters. In stark contrast, Private Whitaker became a symbol of resilience and integrity. Letters poured into Buckingham Palace from people around the world, praising his composure and compassion. Some wrote heartfelt notes thanking him for reminding them of the importance of kindness, while others shared personal stories of overcoming adversity. One letter came from a young girl named Emily, who included a hand-drawn picture of Whitaker standing beside Max. "Thank you for being brave and kind," she wrote in careful block letters. "You showed me that we can always choose love." Such gestures touched Whitaker deeply, reinforcing his belief in the power of small acts of courage to inspire change. Even members of the royal family took notice. Queen Elizabeth herself reportedly expressed her gratitude for Whitaker's conduct, calling him an exemplary representative of the Queen's Guard. During a private ceremony held at the palace, Whitaker received formal commendation for his actions. Though he remained humble throughout the proceedings, deflecting praise onto his training and fellow guardsmen, those closest to him knew how much the recognition meant. "It's not about me," he told reporters later, adhering to protocol but unable to hide the faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's about showing people that there's always a better way forward." But perhaps the most surprising development came in the form of Max's fate. After Victor was deemed unfit to care for the German Shepherd due to his irresponsible behavior, authorities began searching for a suitable home for the dog. Given the circumstances, finding one proved challenging. Many potential adopters hesitated, fearing the stigma attached to Max's association with such a high-profile incident. However, fate intervened in an unexpected way. A retired military officer named Margaret Hargrove, who had dedicated her post-service life to rehabilitating animals, stepped forward to offer Max a new beginning. Margaret had followed the story closely and felt drawn to both the dog and the guard involved. She reached out to Whitaker, expressing her desire to adopt Max and ensure he received the care and affection he deserved. To her delight, Whitaker agreed to meet her and assist in the transition process. Over several visits, they worked together to help Max adjust to his new surroundings. The bond between Whitaker and the dog only grew stronger during this time, with Max often wagging his tail enthusiastically whenever the guard arrived. It was clear that Max recognized Whitaker as someone who had treated him with patience and understanding, a rare gift in a world often quick to judge. For Whitaker, these interactions offered a sense of fulfillment that extended beyond his duties as a soldier. While his primary role was to protect and serve, moments like these reminded him of why he had chosen this path in the first place. "Max isn't just a dog," he confided to Margaret one afternoon as they watched the German Shepherd play fetch in her backyard. "He's a reminder that everyone, even those trained to be aggressive, deserves a chance to show their true nature." Margaret nodded in agreement, adding, "And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to see past the surface." As weeks turned into months, the story of Whitaker and Max continued to resonate with people everywhere. Documentaries and interviews explored the themes of redemption, forgiveness, and the transformative power of kindness. Schools incorporated the incident into lessons about conflict resolution, using Whitaker's actions as a case study in maintaining composure under pressure. Even businesses began referencing the event in workshops, highlighting the importance of leadership rooted in empathy rather than aggression. For Victor, however, life grew increasingly difficult. Public backlash forced him to retreat from social circles he had once dominated. Friends distanced themselves, colleagues avoided eye contact, and clients canceled meetings. The weight of his actions, and the consequences they brought, began to take a toll on his mental health. Rumors circulated that he had sought therapy, though whether he truly embraced self-reflection remained unclear. What was certain, though, was that his name had become synonymous with poor judgment and unchecked prejudice, a stark reminder of the dangers of allowing hatred to dictate one's choices. Back in the square where it all began, life carried on, much as it always had. Tourists still marveled at the changing of the guard, snapping photos and marveling at the precision of the drills. Yet for many who visited, the memory of that fateful day lingered like a quiet echo. Guides leading tours would occasionally point to the spot where Whitaker had stood, recounting the tale of how one man's unwavering dignity had triumphed over another's baseless cruelty. Visitors listened intently, some nodding in appreciation, others visibly moved by the retelling. In a city steeped in history, the story of Whitaker and Max had carved out its own place, a modern legend born from timeless virtues. Through it all, Whitaker remained steadfast in his commitment to duty. He returned to his post each day, resuming the routines that defined his role as a member of the Queen's Guard. To passers-by, he appeared unchanged, disciplined, composed, and utterly devoted to the task at hand. But those who knew him best saw subtle shifts, the way he greeted visitors with a warmer smile, the extra effort he made to engage with children curious about his uniform. These changes, though small, spoke volumes about the impact the incident had on him. It wasn't just about surviving a moment of crisis, it was about emerging from it with a renewed sense of purpose. As the sun set over London one evening, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets, Whitaker stood tall near the palace gates. Beside him sat Max, who had come to visit for the day under Margaret's supervision. The dog leaned contentedly against the guard's leg, his eyes half closed in blissful relaxation. Whitaker glanced down at him, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. For a brief moment, the noise of the city faded away, leaving only the sound of Max's steady breathing and the distant hum of traffic. It was a peaceful scene, one that encapsulated everything Whitaker believed in: strength, compassion, and the enduring power of doing the right thing no matter the odds. And so what had begun as a tense and volatile encounter evolved into something far greater, a testament to the human spirit's capacity for grace, resilience, and hope. Through his actions, Private Thomas Whitaker hadn't just diffused a dangerous situation, he had sparked a movement inspiring countless individuals to reflect on their own values and choices. In a world often divided by fear and mistrust, his story served as a beacon of light, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, kindness has the power to prevail. The legacy of Private Thomas Whitaker's actions stretched far beyond the cobblestone square where they had unfolded. What began as a single, isolated incident soon evolved into a ripple effect, touching lives across continents and inspiring countless individuals to reflect on their own values. The story of how a guard in a crimson tunic and bearskin hat stood firm against hatred while extending kindness even to an aggressive dog became more than just a tale of bravery. It became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of compassion. Months after the confrontation, Whitaker continued his duties with quiet dedication. To those who didn't know him personally, he appeared unchanged, disciplined, stoic, and utterly committed to his role within the Queen's Guard. Yet beneath that composed exterior lay a man deeply affected by the events of that day. Though he never sought recognition or praise, it was impossible for him to ignore the impact his actions had made. Letters from strangers kept arriving, some written by hand, others typed meticulously, and each one carried a message of gratitude. Some writers shared stories of overcoming adversity, crediting Whitaker's example as inspiration to face their own challenges with courage. Others simply expressed admiration for his ability to remain calm when provoked, calling him a true hero and a beacon of humanity. One particularly poignant letter came from a teacher in rural Scotland. She explained how she had used Whitaker's story to teach her students about empathy and conflict resolution. "Your actions reminded us all that strength isn't about fighting back," she wrote. "It's about choosing kindness, even when it feels hardest." Enclosed with the letter was a class photo, featuring 20 smiling children holding handmade signs that read, "Kindness wins." Whitaker pinned the photo to the bulletin board in his barracks, where it joined other tokens of appreciation, a small but meaningful reminder of the difference one person could make. Meanwhile, Max settled comfortably into his new life with Margaret Hargrove. The retired military officer turned animal advocate had taken great care to ensure the German Shepherd adjusted smoothly to his fresh start. Under her guidance, Max blossomed into a loyal companion, shedding the aggression that had once defined him under Victor's ownership. Margaret often joked that Max had become something of a local celebrity, drawing curious visitors eager to meet the dog at the heart of such a remarkable story. During these visits, Whitaker would occasionally stop by, always welcomed warmly by both Margaret and Max. Their bond remained strong, a testament to the connection forged during those tense moments in the square. Watching them together, anyone could see the mutual trust and affection that had grown between them, an unspoken reminder that understanding and patience can heal even the deepest wounds. Victor Langley, on the other hand, faded into obscurity. After serving a reduced sentence due to mitigating circumstances, he attempted to rebuild his life, but found little success. His name had become synonymous with arrogance and prejudice, making it difficult for him to regain any semblance of respectability. Former colleagues avoided him, social circles closed ranks, and potential business partners steered clear of association. While some might have pitied him, most viewed his downfall as a consequence of his own choices. In interviews conducted years later, Whitaker reflected briefly on Victor's fate, emphasizing forgiveness over bitterness. "We all make mistakes," he said thoughtfully. "What matters is whether we learn from them. I hope he finds a way to do better." As time passed, Whitaker's story took on a life of its own. Books were written, documentaries produced, and podcasts dedicated entire episodes to dissecting the lessons embedded in his response to adversity. Schools incorporated his actions into curriculums, teaching students about leadership through empathy rather than force. Corporations invited him to speak at conferences, eager to share his insights on maintaining composure under pressure. Despite the growing attention, Whitaker remained grounded, refusing to let fame alter his character. He politely declined lucrative offers to monetize his newfound status, instead focusing on what truly mattered, serving with honor and inspiring others through his example. Perhaps the most profound outcome of the incident was the cultural shift it sparked. Conversations about racism, prejudice, and the importance of treating others with dignity gained renewed urgency. People began challenging harmful stereotypes and questioning why certain behaviors were tolerated in society. Social media campaigns, inspired by Whitaker's Grace Under Fire, encouraged users to share acts of kindness they witnessed or performed themselves. Hashtags like "Choose Compassion" and "Stand for Kindness" trended globally, uniting people from diverse backgrounds in a collective effort to promote positivity. Even political leaders referenced the story in speeches, urging citizens to emulate Whitaker's unwavering commitment to integrity. Back in London, the square where it all began became a place of pilgrimage for many. Tour guides enthusiastically recounted the details of the confrontation, pointing out the exact spot where Whitaker had knelt to calm Max. Visitors paused there, imagining the scene and reflecting on its significance. Some left flowers or notes of gratitude, creating an impromptu memorial that grew steadily over time. One afternoon, as Whitaker stood guard nearby, a young boy approached him shyly, clutching a small teddy bear dressed in a miniature version of the guard's uniform. "This is for you," the boy whispered, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "You're my hero." Whitaker knelt down to meet the child's gaze, offering a warm smile. "Thank you," he replied softly. "But remember, being brave doesn't mean wearing a uniform. It means doing what's right, no matter what." By the end of the year, Whitaker received an unexpected honor, an invitation to Buckingham Palace for a private audience with members of the royal family. As he walked through the grand halls flanked by fellow guardsmen, he couldn't help but feel a swell of pride, not for himself, but for the institution he represented. Inside the opulent reception room, he was greeted warmly by Queen Elizabeth herself, who praised him for upholding the values of service and humanity. "You remind us all why tradition matters," she said, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Not because it's old, but because it inspires us to be better." Whitaker bowed deeply, humbled by her words. Later, as he stood outside the palace, gazing at the sprawling gardens bathed in golden sunlight, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about contributing to something greater than himself. Years later, long after Whitaker had retired from active duty, his story continued to resonate. Historians included it in accounts of modern British history, framing it as a defining moment that bridged tradition and progress. Memorials were erected in his honor, not as tributes to a single individual, but as reminders of the enduring power of kindness and courage. And though Whitaker rarely spoke publicly about the incident, those who knew him understood its lasting impact. For him, it wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about embodying the principles he believed in and inspiring others to do the same. In the end, Private Thomas Whitaker's legacy transcended borders, generations, and ideologies. His decision to stand firm against hatred, to respond with compassion rather than retaliation, proved that true strength lies not in domination, but in dignity. Through his actions, he reminded the world that every choice matters, that even in the face of hostility, we have the power to choose love over fear, understanding over anger, and unity over division. And so, what had begun as a tense encounter in a bustling London square transformed into a timeless lesson, echoing through the ages as a testament to the boundless potential of the human spirit.